Hello, everyone. We are back. And for those that are tuning in through our live stream, we're excited that you are here with us. I'm not much of a podium speaker, so I'm going to try to scoop around and stay in this vicinity. But do want to talk about the nuts and bolts of Ross. And I want to thank Allie, Dina, Gaynell, and she didn't speak, but her name was Chanel. And she was that person that we were talking about who is now a Ross coordinator, but she was a resident of public housing. Is she in the room? Oh, there she goes. So I just want to thank her. And she's been an awesome Ross coordinator. She emails me when she needs something. And so, and I just want to also say that for those that do not know the Ross mailbox, it is ross-pih@hud.gov. We've shown it on the screen. I probably check that email more than I check my actual email address. So we want to make sure that you guys are getting the information that you need and that you're also contacting us when you need that assistance. So I'm going to go ahead and get started because there's a lot of information to cover. So we're just going to talk about Ross, and what we have on the agenda for right now is talking about the Ross program overview, the core functions of a Ross coordinator, assessing the areas of need, which was something new for FY18 grantees. And I know that there are a couple of grantees that are out there, you guys, that may not have received fiscal year 2018 money. So we'll talk about the differences of that, but you kind of get a heads up of where we've been going with Ross. Eligible Ross participants, we'll talk about that, and then we'll walk through the grant agreement. And if you have looked in your conference folder, we have two sheets or two documents. One is a program overview about Ross, and then we also have the grant agreement. And so we'll walk through that. So the program overview. So the Resident Opportunity, the Ross program, is designed to assist residents of public and Indian housing to make progress towards self-sufficiency. And so one of the things that we want to stress, and Allie was talking about it, Gaynell was talking about it, but is really understanding the continuum of Ross. So we're not expecting that at the end of the program that everyone will be self-sufficient, that everyone will have moved out of public housing, but we want to see that they're moving towards self-sufficiency and what that may look like. And having that economic self-sufficiency, and that's really for work-able adults. And could be for youth, but really for work-able adults. And for those that are elderly and disabled residents, it's about them aging and remaining in place. And what we don't have on there is to avoid costlier forms of care. So you know, when someone, an elderly or disabled person, gets to the point where they may need to go to a nursing home, that can be very costly. And so we want to make sure that we're also avoiding those costs. So Ross is a place-based program, and I think that's really important. So we really want you to impact the developments that you intended to serve through your application. How many people know the developments that they're supposed to serve that was in their application? Good. And the reason why I ask that is because sometimes we have grant writers or what have you that may put in the application that you're going to serve, development A, and you may not even be knowing that. So I want to make sure that you guys know that you're trying to serve all of those that's in your application. The program should address the areas of need that you put into that application. We're going to talk a little bit about that, but that's something new that we instituted this year, which is addressing those areas of need in your application through those assessments that you've done. And the Ross coordinator must work with residents, PHA staff, local partners, and other stakeholders to link those residents to services and remove barriers that may prohibit them from moving towards self-sufficiency. And I'm sure you guys already know this information. So the core functions of a service coordinator. There's the resident needs assessment, which we talked about. So how many people were actually participated in administering the needs assessment for your applications? That's really good. So what we did, we had a sample assessment that went out that we included in our NOFA, which is also called, if I talk in acronyms, just say, Trey, what is that, okay? The Notice of Funding Availability. And we had that sample assessment, which was a community-wide assessment, and had you in 60 days, I know, go out and assess those residents. And you determine from what you guys got back what was important for those residents and, or what barriers seem to be kept coming up or prevalent, and then how you're going to address that. And let me also say this, because we haven't really talked about this, and there's a lot of new grantees out there, and that really kind of got us going with this convening and convincing management, but also us knowing that there's a need for conferences. We were able to fund all eligible applicants, and that's a big round of applause. Because how many people apply year after year and haven't ever received a Ross grant? Exactly. So we had the opportunity to fund all eligible applicants, and that was really because of really good applications. Some not so good, but some were really good. And that's really because how you guys express how you're going to address those areas of need, which came through that resident needs assessment. Then there's the coordination piece. So how are you coordinating between your partners, through other stakeholders, with residents, to be able to provide those services to those residents? And really the core piece of the Ross program is the coordination. And we're also going to talk about another core piece that I believe we kind of skim over. It's towards the end of this little chart here. But the coordination piece is really important because you guys are really connecting folks to partners. You may be doing some form of direct services, but it's really about how you're engaging those residents with partners. Then there's the resident engagement piece. And I don't believe you can be an effective Ross coordinator without having a good engagement strategy with your residents. And why we had Ali come up and talk about motivational interviewing, why we had Gaynell come up and talk about motivational interviewing, is because it's really important to understand the importance of that engagement piece. And I would say one of the sort of things that I often hear, and why I thought it was really important for Ali and Gaynell to really speak about motivational interviewing, is a common question is, my residents are not motivated. And how often you guys hear that? How many people feel that, right? And so hopefully you got some really good strategies, but it's really about that engagement piece that I think will really cultivate them and really get them motivated and moving towards self-sufficiency. I asked a good coordinator friend of mine, he doesn't know he's a friend yet, and I won't point him out, but his name is Ben Delgado, and I went to visit Youth Policy Institute about a month ago, and I asked him, how much time do you spend on case management? Because, the program is called Ross Service Coordinator, so I'm thinking you're spending a lot more time around the coordination. He said about, was it 60 to 80%? You can nod your head, I'm not trying to point you out. Yeah, 60 to 80%, he's over there. 60 to 80% of his time is spent on case management. And I think you guys know also with the change of how we're doing reporting, there's probably a lot more time you're spending on case management because you have to, you want to still continue to do those community-wide events, but now you're collecting information on at the individual record level. And then the evaluation. And I know people have questions about standard for success, so, right? And so really it's how you're going to evaluate moving forward. And we'll talk a lot about the evaluation piece tomorrow. So assessing resident needs. So the Ross coordinator must coordinate services to address the areas of need selected in their application, which we talked about. Each area of need has a set of goals and key performance indicators, and we're going to get at the indicators tomorrow that the Ross coordinator must measure and work towards. Grantees should administer a resident needs assessment throughout the grant term. This is not something that HUD has required in the NOFA, but we want to make sure that you guys are, well, actually we do require it. We just don't require you to submit a resident needs assessment. So in the overview, it says you're to assess the resident needs, but we're not asking you for an annual, unless you want to do that. And in fact, I would probably imagine that Chad and Charles will encourage you guys to send stuff to your field office that allows you to keep them in the loop about what's going on. They may not respond as fast because there's a lot going on, but at least that they know what you're working towards and the progress that you're making in your programs. And so I'm going to go through the areas of need and really what those goals are in that sheet that you have in front of you. So for coordinators, and by the way, this is also kind of in the NOFA, but we refined the language a little bit, and I will also be a little bit transparent. When we were doing the NOFA, we were also learning Standard for Success, as you guys know, is a pilot program. And so the goals were really aspirational. So really what we're trying to get to now is really refining the goals to figure out how can we evaluate you using those key performance metrics. So we're going to talk more about that tomorrow, but wanted to just share that. So coordinators will work with residents to achieve educational attainment under levels that have prepared him or her for a career that pays enough money to support his or her housing, healthcare, and food expenses. So it's really about attaining education that could allow for that resident to support their housing, healthcare, and food expenses. Health and wellness, that goal is coordinators will work with residents to facilitate an environment and/or resources that empower residents to pursue and achieve personal goals towards self-sufficiency, and the residents or their family's physical and mental health does not prevent him or her from pursuing education or employment. So that's really important, that not only their physical health, but their mental health is to a place where they can pursue either education or employment. Reentry. So you guys know we added reentry as something that coordinators can work on. I think very few housing authorities or grantees chose reentry. If you chose reentry, could you rate? Yeah, it was very few. But for those coordinators, you'll support residents and their families who have experienced involvement with the justice system to remove barriers to education, criminal health and wellness, and/or personal family stability, which are critical to a family or individual moving towards self-sufficiency. And I see we have a question, but we're going to have time for Q&A. Okay? Employment. Coordinators will work with residents to gain employment with adequate pay and benefits and maintains employment for more than 12 months. So what this is trying to get to is we want to see that when we're looking at your Standard for Success data, how many people are being employed for longer than 12 months? This is not something that we're requiring right now, but this is something that's aspirational that we want to see happening, or say evaluating you on right now. Financial literacy. Coordinators will support residents in financial coaching and literacy so that the residents' household monthly expenses debts do not exceed their monthly earned income, and their earned income is to support housing, healthcare, and food expenses. So once again, it's really getting at the housing, healthcare, and food expenses. Elderly and disabled residents, coordinators will work to coordinate services for elderly or disabled residents to better enable residents to reach and maintain their desired level of independence. And once again, it's about the aging and remaining in place to avoid costlier forms of care. And substance abuse, I believe there are very few that chose this. Coordinators will work with service providers to address substance abuse through prevention and intervention services. And I'm just going to say a side note that I recognize that a lot of folks serve elderly and disabled residents. How many folks serve? See, I think it's actually more than half of our ROS coordinators serve elderly and disabled residents. So we recognize the importance of the ROS program for those elderly and disabled public housing units. But I thought it was very interesting of how many people chose elderly and disabled residents and financial literacy. So it'd be really interesting to hear, maybe you could just stop me one-on-one to say why is that? That'd be really, I'm really interested to hear. I think I know, but I want to hear from you guys about that. So eligible ROS participants. Public housing residents, this is really important. That's public housing residents and NAHASDA assisted housing residents. So with that, I know you guys may do community events and someone that may not be a public housing resident may show up. generally that's okay, right? If you're doing a job fair, you're not going to have a rope that says, show me your public housing card or something like that. We don't want that to happen. We want to make sure that we open that up for all. But when it comes to how you're interacting the case management and coordinating services, it's really targeted for the public housing developments that you're serving. And that goes as well for those that are serving tribes or tribal governments. And this includes youth, work-able adults, elderly and disabled residents, and disabled persons. One of the differences, if anyone has an FSS program, the Family Self-Sufficiency Program, or a Jobs Plus program, they really focus on work-able adults. And you can be a youth and be a part of Jobs Plus, you can be a youth and be a part of Family Self-Sufficiency Program, but it really is to target work-able adults. For Ross, it can target anyone that's a part of that family. And so I want you to think about that when you're serving residents, and we also understand that majority of public, I think it's 50 or so of public housing residents are elderly and disabled residents. And I think the next big chunk is youth. So we know with Ross, we have a part to play in how we're serving not only work-able adults, but those that are elderly, disabled, and youth. So I wanted to take a lot of time to talk about the grant agreement. And hopefully this does not scare you. I'm going to try to use, what did Ali say, the spirit-filled stuff. So if I use the non-spirit-filled stuff, go boo, 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 okay? All right. So the Ross grant is a cost reimbursable grant. Okay, so that means for any cost that you incurred, you can then go to your HUD field office and ask for that money to be drawn down to pay the agency back, okay? The grant term is 36 months beginning March 18, 2019. So I know a lot of folks that are renewal applicants or renewal grantees ask the question, can I start my grant after March 18th? And the question is, no. So it's gonna actually start March 18th and it's counting from 36 months from there. Something that we did and why this is really important, why we're also able to award eligible applicants, is that we're really being conscious of how many people are sitting on money. And a lot of folks, and you may not know this as Ross coordinators, but your finance departments may know it, that you may be just sitting on hundreds and thousands of dollars of Ross funds because of the accumulation over time. And so we wanted to give the opportunity to expand the program even at level funding so we can award more coordinators out there. So we're really kind of getting serious about the grant extensions and why we're extending the grant. And so you may hear field office folks talk about when it comes to grant extensions, it can't be just about spending money. There has to be a performance-related effort that's going on, as well as you can't just have a new grant sitting and just waiting, because some folks have grants sitting and waiting for 2-3 years before they start to expend it. Grantees cannot expend FY18 funds until they have exhausted their prior Ross grant funds. And I think this is really important that all of what Ross is governed by, federal laws, including HUD appropriations, executive orders, the FY18 NOFA, and for those that are not FY18 grantees, it will be whatever NOFA that you applied under, the 24 CFR Part 24, 2 CFR Part 200, and 24 CFR Part 964. And this is really important, all that other stuff, because sometimes HUD folks may come and say, we're about to do this, and do this, and you say, where do you even get that from? And then my smart remark is, 2 CFR Part 200, you know? But that's really important because it really gives guidelines of not only just the Ross program, but all federal funds and how it's to be not only administered, but then all the requirements that come with federal funding. So that's really important for you guys to know. The grantee shall attend so this is about grant administration and conditions, which is Article 2, I think if you flip the page, the grantee shall attend meetings if requested by HUD. So that means some field office folks may say we want to do a site visit. I think it's Jonathan just asked me, Jonathan, right? Asked me, do I do site visits? I said, yeah, and I'll probably come with the field office staff, but there may be random times where you have to do a site visit, and it's also, not to scare anyone, there also may be times that an audit has to take place, just because of just a random sample of grantees that are chosen, and you're going to be required to attend those meetings. The work to be performed under this grant agreement is outlined in the FY18 NOFA, which we talked about. Grant funds shall be used only for eligible activities. And those eligible activities is the salary and fringe, it's the training, and admin. And so let's talk a little bit about salary and fringe, which is your salary and fringe for those that are ROS coordinators. And we want to make sure that you guys are expending those funds. So sometimes may check in with your finance department, because some folks ran into this when applying for FY18 funding. They didn't know that that certain amounts of drawdowns in certain budget line items were not expended because their finance department didn't do it yet, and it cost some folks a new grant. So you want to make sure that you're communicating. Then there's the training, and the training is really to support the ROS coordinators. So I know some supervisors are here and some executive directors really wanted to come, but the funds are really to support the training of those that are ROS coordinators. So want to empower you guys to really do that training, and we increase training amount each year from 2,000 to 2,500 to really encourage you guys to go out and do trainings. And we know that travel can often be expensive with trainings, as well as registrations for trainings can tend to be expensive. So we want to encourage you guys to do that each year. And it may be good for you to do it. I know we have 2,500 for each year, but really do it in the beginning, because in the third year, you may want to do a training, but it's really more beneficial when you do it towards the beginning, or if in your third year, in the beginning of that third year. And then the admin cost, I think folks get into a lot of trouble sometimes about admin costs, but it's really to support the administration of the grant and not the administration of your agency. Does that make sense? So we're not paying for, the call center at Utopia Housing Authority. We're not paying for cell phone bills for all resident services staff. It's really to support the ROS coordinator and those programs, and even do some fee payments for residents. So I often say with admin, if you can't do it for all residents, you probably shouldn't do it at all. So we're going to talk about this, but costs have to be reasonable, necessary, and allocable. And that's really with admin costs. The grantee must receive approval from HUD field staff to travel outside of the local area, which you guys should probably know about that, even though we did a little bit different for this conference. But you'll contact your field staff, and we're going to talk about the role of the field staff in a few. Grantees needing to extend the grant term must request an extension 60 days. So we'll worry about that at the end of your grant, because none of you are going to extend your grants, right? Right, good. And grantees are required to begin implementing program within 60 days. So if you haven't started implementing your program, contact your HUD field office, contact the ROS mailbox, because we want to make sure that you guys are implementing your programs starting now, at least some form of movement. I know people have issues with procurement, with hiring coordinators, if they're with the city or the state, or whatever process they may have, we want to make sure that you guys are starting at least some movement towards implementing your program. The grantee shall use, this is about financial responsibility. I'm probably going to breeze over this because we're going to talk a lot about financial responsibilities, but some really important points: that the grantee shall use leverage match resources in accordance with this approved application approval of the HUD field office. So how many people know the match partnerships that you have in your applications? Good. And if you don't, it's really important for you to know who and what your match is, because if in the instance that HUD comes and asks questions about your match partners and how much money was given and how much money has been used, it's really important for you guys to know that, because that is a requirement. The grantee is required to draw down funds through e-locks. The grantee agrees to comply with the grant requirements of 2 CFR Part 200, including audit requirements. And do want to stress, if you have some free time, tonight when you're not doing anything because you're in a brand new city and DC is great, and you just want to go back to your hotel room and relax, you can pull out 2 CFR Part 200 and have an awesome read, okay? Why are you guys laughing? Was that a boo? The grantee shall minimize the time between the transfer of funds from HUD to the disbursement of funds. So we want to make sure when you draw down funds, it's just not sitting and waiting 2 weeks before it's paid out to whomever it needs to be paid out to. Basically, who wants to get their paycheck late? Yeah, so we want to make sure that your agencies are paying you guys in time when they're drawing down those funds. This is really important, and it's highlighted because I'm going to send out an amended grant agreement. If not this week, start the process next week. And if you know anything about HUD, it takes a little while for us to do things. But something that's important is FY18 grantees that received a commitment to enter into a housing payment, so that's a RAD conversion, at the projects to be served can retain their FY18 grants as long as, one, the CHAP was received after the Ross application deadline, which was July 30th, and this is only pertaining to FY18 grantees. And two, the projects do not convert through RAD prior to the start of the grant term. So I think there are some where they were affected by RAD, and we had a period between the application deadline and when we made the award, and you applied for RAD during that time. We're now saying as long as those units didn't go from public housing to Section A or PBRA, project-based rental assistance, that you're okay. If you have questions, we can ask during that Q&A time. Failure to maintain nonprofit status throughout the grant term may result in the termination of FY18 Ross grant. And this is really important because we not just want to know that you're a nonprofit, but that your status is in good standing, okay? And so want to make sure your status is up to date. You're doing those annual filings. So method of payment, the grantee may not draw down grant funds until HUD has received an approved any certifications and disclosures. All preconditions listed in the grant agreement, the NOFA, or in the award must be completed. Grantee has an e-locks account. And then we've talked about this, but grantees may request, this is for renewal applicants, renewal grantees. Grantees may request reimbursement for eligible costs incurred between December 21st, 2018, that's the date that we announced the award, and March 18, 2019, where such costs were necessary for the efficient and timely performance of eligible activities under the FY18 Ross grant. So I'll just kind of paraphrase that. If you received partial funding, for example, for FY18, for your FY15 grant, because HUD didn't have enough funds to fully award you, you may have ran out of Ross funds before your grant term ended. And so what we're saying here is that if between December 21st and March 18th, you can apply or request from the HUD field office to be reimbursed during that time. So that's an example of how that may work. But I think no one really falls into that category but one housing authority, and I think she may be here, but I won't point them out. Lincoln Housing Authority. So if that's you, you would fall in that category. On an annual basis, the grantee must submit performance and financial reports to HUD. The financial reports shall be submitted using HUD SF425, and performance metrics will be submitted through HUD Standard for Success. If the grantee is not meeting program objectives, the grantee may be required to submit a narrative to explain why objectives are not being met. And this is kind of outlined in that Part 2 CFR, Part 200, where we could put special conditions on your award in the case that you're not meeting any performance or reporting requirements. The grantee must keep on file the source of data used to enter performance. And I believe Part 200 gets on that. We'll probably talk about that a little later, about how long you're supposed to keep grant documents. HUD may determine the grantee's progress based upon a comparison between the grantee's performance reported through Standard for Success. We'll talk more about that tomorrow. Final annual report must be submitted 60 days after the end of the grant term, and no grant payment shall be approved until all required reports are received. So there may be an instance where you want to receive your final drawdown, and your HUD field office staff person may say, hey, you haven't sent in your SF425, you haven't done this. In fact, you never even sent in your year one report. And so how can we give you that drawdown? We want to make sure that you've done all the reporting requirements. I do want to stress, because all of the dates now should be the same for when you're submitting your reports, which is October 30th of each year, but want to point out that the last report, which is also highlighted in blue because it's going to be amended because the date was wrong in the original grant agreement that we sent to you guys, and that is May 16th will be the date of your final report. And by the way, we're going to send this PowerPoint out to everyone. Yeah. Woo! All right. So I know I'm almost out of time. So grantees shall comply with all current HUD statutes, regulations, program rules, and program guidance. Grantees shall maintain and have access to documents relating to award and administration of this grant for at least 3 years. So that's what we're talking about. And I'm just going to skip down to the last one so you guys can know this, because the other stuff may not make sense to you guys, but want to make sure that the second to last bullet, the grantee's selection of the depository facility shall be compliant with federal regulations. I think all of you guys should be fine, but it's just important to note that you want to make sure that folks are your bank stuff is in line and good, and you're not going to get in trouble. I don't know if anybody in there ever got in trouble with federal funds, but it's not something that you want to go through, because you probably wouldn't be in this room. And grant funds must be used in accordance with all applicable civil rights and equal opportunity laws and regulations. And so when you receive federal funds, there are other conditions for just having a federal fund that also must be in place. And the NOFA spells out some things, but also, like I talked about, those other governing documents or statutes or regulations or regulatory language speaks to that. A grantee may lease space for program activities only if lease is for existing facilities not requiring rehabilitation or construction, so I think we're fine with that. But I just want to kind of put out there that some folks also may have used match, put down, for example, I am PHAA, and I put down my community space as a match and the lease of the annual lease rate to be that match amount. That's not really a match, because HUD is also paying for that community space, right? And so we want to make sure that you guys are not using that. If you guys are in that case, we want to make sure that you reach out to us about that. And I'm going to skip over just for time, because we talked about the Part 200 stuff. But the grantee's computer systems must operate in accordance with HUD's computer systems and software. And I think all of you guys should be fine. If you have a computer that has the internet, you have Word, PowerPoint, and Excel, I think you guys should be fine to be in compliance with HUD computer systems. Any contract administrators out there? Nice. So I think one thing that's really important, that one, understanding that the contract administrators do have Are you from Denver Housing Authority? Okay. Trying to figure it out. Well, I'll figure it out. But if you're a contract administrator, there is a responsibility that you have for the grant. And oftentimes what we've seen, especially in cases where the grantee may not be doing as well, the contract administrator may also have some blame in that depending on their involvement. So you want to make sure that if you are a contract administrator, that you're also aware of all of the guidelines that are in place. And contract administrators are expressly forbidden from accessing ELOCs, and that means just drawing down funds. HUD has gone into contract with the grantee, and the grantee has went into contract with you. So we want to make sure that the grantee is responsible for drawing down those funds. And we talked about Part 200. We talked about those financial, sort of what's required as far as reports. But when you're closing out your grant, in addition to the SF 425 and the HUD Standard for Success data that you're sending in annually, we do ask that you send in 60 days prior to the end of the grant term a certification of project completion. And this really is just a formal letter from your authorized representative saying that you're completing the program. Some folks have used, added some narrative language to say what their successes has been, and a certification of compliance with all requirements of the grant agreement. So everyone go, dun, 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 dun. Okay. If you're in default, and that means that something has happened where you are not meeting HUD requirements when it comes to the grant, you may go into default, and we may request not only some conditions on your award, but also may suspend your award or terminate your award. And we want to make sure that none of you guys are in that place. So if HUD makes an initial determination that the grantee is in default, and that can be from using funds for ineligible expenses. And I do want to say this, that ineligible expenses you could spend money on ineligible expenses, and HUD will not even know it until we do an audit. And so you want to make sure that each and every time that you're drawing down funds, that you're also making sure that it's for eligible expenses. If something seems a bit rocky or shaky, just say, hey, HUD staff person, is this an eligible expense? And I know many of you guys are really good about that, but if it's paying for something that just seems a little bit questionable, feel free to reach out, because you don't want to go into a place where you're in default. And so if HUD make the following additional corrective and remedial actions under this grant agreement, we can change the method of payment, meaning we can either stop payment or require, if we need to always review any of your grant documents to support any of your drawdowns, suspend the grant, reduce the grant in the amount affected by the HUD default, terminate the grant, take action against the grantee, which you don't want that to happen, require reimbursement by the grantee. How many people have $300,000? Exactly. So we want to make sure that you never get to the point where you have to reimburse HUD for money. Did I see someone raise their hand for $300,000? Okay. And take any remedial action legally available. So I'm actually going to bring up, Charles and Chad, who are going to join at the table, but I can take one or two questions if you have about this session when it comes to the grant agreement and the program overview. And if you can come to the mic, for those that are live streaming, we want to make sure we're, yeah. Come on, Miss Sona, you got it. Yep.
Good morning.
Good morning.
We're a new grantee, and we're a tribal grantee. And so one of my questions is, and I think we're doing pretty good for a new program, what really are your expectations for a new program? I know we have to get our partners in place, and much of that. So like the 50 residents that you should be servicing, and we're not even getting a full year before our first report. Are you still requiring that of us?
Nope, and we'll talk about that. HUD hasn't said to you yet how many people you need to serve, how many people need to be employed. What we do say in the NOFA is, or what you say in the NOFA, how many units you're going to serve, and then we also have that 50 minimum requirement. So right now, there's a 50 minimum requirement, but when it comes to how many people you're going to serve, like the logic model was that, right? Where you had a certain amount of goals and we wanted to see that outcomes. We haven't gotten to that point yet. And so that should probably relieve some burden of a lot of folks, but we haven't gotten to that place yet.
And one quick follow-up on in-kind batch or leveraging. How do you want that documented? I've worked for like ACF and other federal programs where you sign for each specific activity or whatever. Do you have to do that individually like that, or can we say our AODA program worked with this individual for X amount of hours and sign each one, or a blanket one at the end?
So we do ask for the match letters, but we also, in the case that you may have an audit or some sort of review come and take place, we want to see the match amount and how that's being expended throughout that grant term. So hopefully that answers your question. Zona?
Yes. I have a couple questions. The first one is, can we use the membership for American Association of Service Coordinators as part of training expenses?
Yes, so I know there are folks that are in the room that may be ASK members. You can use your admin costs to support those type of...
admin costs or training costs?
You could use training costs if you're going to the training. You can use admin costs for
the membership costs?
Yep.
And you can't use the membership for the training costs?
You could, too.
Okay.
Yep.
And then the other one is, I just want to, because sometimes when you go to the conference, they do have you do the membership in the conference costs too.
Right. So the membership is a little bit different because you're paying for membership for ASK, and the ASK conference do training. So if you're paying for training or travel, then you can use that training and travel dollars.
But you can't use the membership for training?
No.
Okay, because part of that membership includes the webinars and stuff?
Right, and I think we'll have to visit that because that's a case-by-case type situation, because their membership is a little bit different than just a strict...
Right, it is related to training,
right,
and you
right,
can't do the training unless you have the membership.
But in general, there are cases where you may become a member of another organization that has separate trainings as opposed to their membership. You can use those admin funds to pay for that.
And then I just want to clarify, because I know in prior service coordinator grants, you either serve families or seniors, but not both. And this one, you can serve both?
So you can't serve, and we didn't talk about this, you can't serve elderly and disabled residents if you have elderly and disabled service coordinator money that's coming out of the operating fund. Okay, and I don't think anyone...
For that site or for any site?
That's for any site. So if you're receiving right now elderly and disabled service coordinator fund, you're forfeiting those funds from the operating fund, because now you're receiving ROS funding. So what we've said to folks is hold your brakes on serving elderly and disabled out of the ROS funding so that you could continue to receive your elderly and disabled service.
What if it's through multifamily housing though?
Well, that's different. So that's a different pot of money.
Different.
Yep.
Okay. All
Cool.
right.
So we're going to move to Charles and Chad, and we're going to have Q&A right after this, but I want to keep it going.
Thank you, Troy. Again, my name is...
Let me introduce Chad. We are part of HUD's short committee. But Chad is out of our Portland office, and he's a really, really, really good, I call him like, I'm going to probably get in trouble, but one of the great people that I have the pleasure of working with. He's always on it, and one that is really, I believe, passionate about not only the Ross program, but any of our self-sufficiency programs. And I thought it would be very, very nice for him to be here to give you guys, I think, the lens from those that are in the field and who's working with you. And so here goes Chad.
Thank you, Trey. So Charles Eldridge and I will be leading this session. We'll talk a lot about ELOCs, we'll talk about eligible costs and match, and also drawing down. So let me just go ahead and begin with the... First, I want to remind everybody in the audience that you have the opportunity to get a lot of this information that Trey and Charles and I were talking about by visiting the Ross Online Learning Guide. It has a complete rundown of everything that you need to know about the nuts and bolts of the Ross program, the day-to-day operations of the Ross program. I recommend you kind of use this link in the PowerPoint to look at it when you got time. It'll take you, you can spend a few hours at it, or you can spend a whole day looking through all of the different volumes. But it's really helpful to just kind of show you how to operate your program and to have a successful program. Next, I want to talk a little bit about also having a Ross action plan. So in the Ross action plan, there's really, service coordinators are responsible for internal program management, including developing a Ross action plan, managing the program, and ensuring that they obtain needed training, like attending here today. So when it comes to creating a Ross action plan, these are just some of the things we're kind of looking for. For example, you should have a method for resident and participant outreach, referrals, and program outcomes. For example, are you limiting your engagement with like briefings, orientations? When or how are you doing your outreach to your participant? Are you just doing it on site? You need to kind of have a plan within your organization for how you're going to do that outreach to your participants. The next is like case management procedures and individual training plans. How often are you going to be meeting with your participants? Are you going to be meeting with them quarterly? Are you going to be meeting with them one-on-one? Are you going to have group sessions? Are you going to go to their residence? Are they going to come to your residence? You need to have a plan in your action plan for how frequently you'll be meeting with them and on what course. The next is the software tools for tracking. This is the third bullet here. You should basically have some kind of a client caseworker case note system, something that you can pull up to demonstrate that you met with the participants, when you met with them, what you did, what you talked about, so that when HUD does do an audit, you can easily show us, or you can demonstrate that you met with the participants. The next, and this is a big one, a list of partners, primary POCs, and methods served. It should be no wonder that you should have a directory or a catalog of community partners that you engage with. You should have had that when you assembled your match. You should know right off the top who your local food banks are, who your GED providers are in the area. Whatever your services you're providing, you should be able to, if you were to leave or go away or to depart from the agency, somebody should be able to pick up that community list and work from that community list so that you're not reinventing the wheel and reestablishing the partnerships. The next is a method, the fifth bullet down here is a method for generating funding to promote the program, such as match and in-kind services, as we mentioned there. You want to keep the sustainability of the program going. And the sixth bullet down, plans for coordinating Ross programs with PHA leadership and other key staff. This is important because you need to know the executive director at your housing agency, for example, or the finance department. How often are you meeting with them? Are you meeting with your finance department to know that they're doing the draws timely? You need to have some kind of collaboration. You don't want to be working in a silo and not speaking with your leadership team or your other PHA staff so that you're getting the referrals for certain participants. And the last bullet there, other key organizational policies and procedures relevant to the Ross program. Next, I'm going to go ahead and skip a little bit now to the locks. How many of you in the room have used locks or know what locks is? It's good, about half. Good, excellent. So ELOCs is a HUD grant disbursement system. All of the HUD grants, FSS, Ross Service Coordinator, Operating Subsidy, Capital Fund Program, if you work with the housing agency, it's in ELOCs, and they pull down the grants from ELOCs. ELOCs provides disbursement controls for HUD grants programs to thousands of HUD business partners. First, when you want to in order to obtain access to ELOCs, you need to have a secure systems ID. And this is a secure systems ID is kind of the first step into HUD systems, which gives you access to other systems beyond ELOCs. You will register that through the REAC. And I don't want to get too technical into that, but if someone in your agency needs to have the ELOCs access, whether it be you or the CFO or the accounting staff, somebody needs to have a secure systems ID, and that needs to register for ELOCs. As mentioned there, the first step is to get a secure systems registration, complete that, and then once you have a secure systems ID, then you go ahead and complete the HUD 27054E form, which is a registration user access form for the ELOC system. Once you have those steps completed, then you go ahead and you log in through secure systems, just a basic, it will be an M number for you all, an M number and a password. And then depending upon what access you have through your secure systems, you'll see a variety of systems that you may be able to access through secure systems. One of those would be ELOCs. From ELOCs, once you kind of click into ELOCs and drill down a little bit, then you can go ahead and launch different applications in the ELOCs. For example, drawing down vouchers, seeing how much money has been expended, seeing where your budget line items are allocated to. This particular slide is an example. So right now through the ROS program, all of your budget line items will be assigned to either BLI 1168, which is a project coordinator, or BLI 1268, which is training cost, or BLI 1868, which is administrative cost. It's important to note that this is a 3-year grant. So ideally, in this example here, this particular grantee was awarded $210,000. So it's limited through the NOFA, it's limited to $70,000 per coordinator per year. The same thing for training costs. It's a 3-year grant, so you're limited to approximately $2,000 in training costs per year. And the same thing for administration, $30,000 in administration. You should spend about $10,000 a year in administration. So what that means is we're looking ideally in a perfect situation that you guys are drawing down an equal amount of about 1/36 of the grant each and every month, because Charles will get on my case. He'll contact the field offices when we see grantees that aren't drawing down timely, or maybe they're 6 or 12 months into the grant and they've only drawn down, a small fraction of the grant. We want to see those timely drawdowns. We want to see them in respective budget line items: project coordinator, training cost, and administration cost. Next, I'm going to skip a little bit to the financial management system, and this is kind of the boring part that Trey was mentioning, but this all stems from 2 CFR 200, what we're looking for in the financial management system that deems it to be a successful and eligible financial management system. We're looking for a retention requirements of records. What that means is housing authorities or tribal organizations or nonprofits or resident associations must be able to have financial records that support the documents, and it's the retention of records, excuse me. This is the retention of records. You need to keep all your expense receipts that you've spent on the grant and all the activities that you've conducted against the grant for a total of 3 years. You can't get rid of it or discard it until 3 years after the grant expires or the last activity against that grant. For example, your last drawdown, 3 years of your last drawdown, the expiration of the grant. The second thing is request for a transfer of records. HUD may make arrangements for grantees to retain any records that are continuously needed for joint use. There may be a need for you to share those with other organizations, so we need to make sure that you have the ability to transfer those records as needed. The next thing is a methods for collection, transmission, and storage of information. Grantees should, whenever practical, collect, transmit, and store federal award information in an open and computer retrievable formats rather than closed formats. So we're basically wanting you to make sure that you're demonstrating that you can send us your Excel documents to demonstrate that what you've spent, and it's not all on hard copy. You don't need to mail it to us. The next is the access to records. HUD must have the right to access to any documents, papers, or other records of the grantee, which are pertinent to the federal award in order to make audits, examinations, experts, and transcripts. We will come on site occasionally and do a review of your ROS program. We're going to need to look at that And we need to be able to have access to those records. So you can't, besides the fact that there's going to be personally identifiable information, we're not going to be, sending that out to anybody. We're just going to need to be able to retrieve that information for how you are running your program. The last thing is the restriction on public access to records. This just means that HUD may not place restrictions on the grantee that limit public access to the records, and that except for the personal identifiable information. We're not going to restrict that information so that you may get a request from the public at large to look at some of your records and how you spent those grant funds. With that said, maybe I sped through that a little bit too much, but I'm going to go ahead and tag team with Charles on this, and I'm going to come back up and speak a little bit about reporting requirements.
So Charles is going to come up, and I'm going to introduce him because I forgot to do that the last time as well. So Charles is actually out of our Fort Worth HUD office, and he is an amazing person if you haven't met him yet. One of the friendliest people that I've met here at HUD, because we're all friendly here at HUD. And he's one also that I find to be very passionate about the work, as well as much more on the grounds and helping grantees, and he will find ways for grantees to really achieve what they're trying to achieve within the Ross program. So give it up for my favorite employee here at HUD, Charles Eldred.
Well, I would like to start out by saying that I circled the room and I asked you all, I said, how many of you all know your field office staff? A lot of you all said, no, I don't know if you know we even had a field staff. Well, you do. And let me tell you why it's important that you know that you have a field office staff, because they're going to be the ones that approve your pay for being here. So if you don't find out who your field office staff is, this training will not be paid for. So I highly suggest you find out who they are. So, also, by you all being here, it tells me that HUD has shown you the money. So, what I'm going to spend this next slide doing is telling you how to spend it, because that's very, very important that you know what the eligible costs are. So, first, like Trey had mentioned earlier, your eligible costs for salary and fringe benefits, those funds are, okay, sorry, I get the spirit, so I may want to warm around. Okay, so I just want to say those funds awarded to you for salary and fringe benefits, those funds are for salaries to the grantee shall only be used for fringe benefits of the Ross Service Coordinator. Repeat that after me. Those funds are to be used for Ross Service Coordinator. Thank you. Next, more than one person can share that position. So just keep that in mind. It doesn't have to be one person. The grantee may also hire a part-time coordinator to assist in that role as well. Also, however, the part-time coordinator must still serve 50 residents, okay? So keep that in mind. That 50 number is really, really, really important. So keep that in mind, okay? Grantees are expected to pay their service coordinator the amount HUD funded you to pay them. So keep in mind, when you all submit your budget to us and refund that, and if that coordinator's position is $70,000 a year, whatever it is, that is what you are required to pay that Ross service coordinator. Oh, I'm sorry. I don't know if I have an inch to give you. Oh, okay, yeah, now I do. I thought I was going to put it there. Come back. They won't ever ask me back. Okay. Back to that. Okay. Funds for the salary of the Ross Service Coordinator may not be used to supplement any other grant staff members. Are we clear on that? No other grant staff member other than the Ross Service Coordinator. Okay. Next. I'm sorry.
You can have a salary higher than that Ross amount, correct?
Well, maybe you can. However, it cannot be Ross money. We're good, okay. 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 Yes, and Trey just reminded me we're going to take your questions at the end. Okay. You wanted part of the act, I know. Okay. Training and travel related professional and program development funds, very important, may be requested to pay for training and travel costs only if related to the professional and program development for the Ross Service Coordinator. Are we clear on that? That was a lot I just said, but I just want to make sure that you all know how the training and the travel related funds work. Also, all training associated travel for the Ross Service staff person must be approved by your HUD local field office. So, therefore, if you all have traveled here without permission by your local field office, you know the end of that sentence, okay? Okay, I don't have to tell you that. But I think that this was a little different, as Trey mentioned. We kind of worked in partnership with your local field offices to make sure that you all could get here. So you all will be fine that came here with the approval of your local field office, okay? And then training and travel related costs up to $2,500 per year per Ross Service Coordinator position for pertinent training associated with your travel. Said a lot with being that, we can sometimes, based on like we had said earlier, may need to address that. Some of you all did have to adjust that to come here because of the cost. It's 3 years of Ross travel and training funding. So as long as you know that it's up to the $2,500 a year, and then by case, we may have to alter that just a little bit. Okay? Administrative costs, so important. And I do want you all to know you can pay for pens for your Ross program. I've had to give out 12 pens this morning. So those of you, you need to know that pens are included in your Ross program. And I'm going to bill you all for those pens because I got them from the HUD board. Okay. So administrative costs. The funds HUD awards to the Ross Service Code grantees to cover administrative costs may only be used to support the Ross program. And I think we had some conversation, and Trey mentioned some of that earlier, to really specify that the administrative funds are to support the activities of your Ross program. The funds may not be used by grantees' central office center costs. So be clear about that. We really want you to use those administrative funds to support and enrich and enhance the activities of your Ross program. So important. I know it's not a whole lot of funds, but the funds that we do provide you, we definitely want it to go towards supporting your Ross program. Also, that you're aware that the funds can also be used for administrative staff support. So those individuals that support the activities of your Ross program, those funds can also be used for that as well. Local transportation by your Ross service coordinators. Okay? Keep in mind. So those of you that are the Ross Service Coordinator, you can use some of your administrative funds to support your travel, local travel. Because anything else traveling in the air, something like that, needs to be approved by your local field office. Stipends for reasonable out-of-pocket costs incurred by residents in your program. So whatever that makes sense, case by case, you can use some of your administrative funds to support some of the activity of your residents, such as local transportation to and from job search, job activity, maybe those that may have some issues with child care related issues. And again, you can look at those things on a case by case, but we just want to know that some of your admin dollars can be used to support those activities. Tracking and evaluation of your grant program, which is so important. And it would concern me if none of the funds was going toward that particular administrative function. So please know that we encourage you, and you can use your administrative funds to support your evaluation and tracking of your Ross program. Also, the purchase of furniture and office equipment for the Ross program. I know some of the EDs may need a new sofa, and you may need a new desk and all of that, but anywho, it's for the Ross program. So any type of computers or whatever, activity tables or whatever you need to support the enrichment, enhancement of your Ross program, those administrative funds are available for you to use them in that way. Also, the purchase of hardware, software to support the Ross participant program, financial, professional, and informational needs and goals. Such purchases may not be made for individual purposes and for your individual participants. Keep that in mind. I know that we do not want you to use, and I use the term kind of widespread direct costs that way. We're not paying for anyone to attend treatment programs, or maybe we're not paying for anybody to go to college, those type of activities. So those are things may be where you increase your partners. If you have some need for those type of services for your clients, that we hope that you can satisfy those services through your community partners. Okay. Ineligible costs. That happens. So we really, really want to focus some time on talking about it ain't just spend it all. We got it, let's go to spending it. Because we want you to be cautious that there are some things that are ineligible costs related to this grant. So funds may not be used for activities other than the salary and benefits of the Ross Service Coordinator and related administrative training and associated training activities. Plain and simple. Okay? Also, funds may not be used to pay the salary of the family self-sufficiency person. We hear that a lot. Oh, we work so well together, you know. We hang out, we hang out with the FSS people. We use their PCC folks and all of that and all that. Anyway, go and continue to do that. I think it's great when we see the Ross program, for those of you all have FSS and Ross, to see the programs working together, to see you sharing your community partners, all that is wonderful and great. However, you cannot pay for it, okay, out of your Ross fund. Continue to do it. We welcome you to do it, but just don't pay for it. Also, the same with the ACV folks. You know, I know you love them too. The Housing Choice Voucher, FSS person, great. What they do at ACV, we love that, great work, but you can't pay for it out of the Ross funds, okay? Non-federal funds, help yourself, but not our Ross funds, okay? Bless you. Okay, Ross funds cannot be used to hire to pay for the service contract administrator. Are we clear about the contract administrator? Trey mentioned that person. Definitely want them to support your activities, work very closely with you, be in partnership to help you physically manage your grant and all of the good things that that relationship brings, but you cannot pay for the services of your contract administrator. Administrative funds may not be used to support the Ross program, a grantee central office cost. I think I said that. Costs, okay, I'll say it again. And Ross administrative funds to cover the other grantee costs. Remember that, can't do that. And if upon review, the field office or area ONAP determines that funds have been used for ineligible activity, knock, knock, knock at your door, the grantee will be required to repay those funds back. And we definitely don't want that to occur. We give you the funds. We know 99.9% of you use them the way that you're supposed to. We see that all the time. But in the event that you don't, we're going to require that you pay those funds back, and we pay them back with non-federal funds, okay? Okay. Match. And I think Trey kind of went over match, but I'll kind of drive down a little bit more about the match. The purpose of the match is to ensure grantees have committed partners to address the needs of your residents. Cannot do this program without community partners. We do not give you enough Ross funds to do all the wonderful things that you do for the families. So we know that match is such a requirement, and that's the purpose of it. We also require that the match be 25% of the total grant. Do I need to do any figuring on what that comes to for any of you? Okay, we're clear on that. 25% of the total, okay, got that. The match may be provided as in-kind or cash. So, and this comes up to 25%. Okay, all right, you getting it, you with me. Okay, the resource in-kind service can include in-kind service provided to the applicant, federal, state, or local funding sources and private contributions. So all of that can help make up the 25% match, okay? Okay, more information regarding match audit procedures can be found on our HUD Exchange website. We have a whole lot of great information, and if you have not visited that website, please do, because we provide a whole lot of great information on how you can, and to assist you with successfully implementing your Ross program. Okay? More match. Okay, match requirements continues. Okay, the match letters must be kept on file for verification of audit purposes. And believe it or not, we do come out. We will come out. And we will ask to see your match letters. And we will go through your match letters. How many have them on file, know where they are, could pull them out if I walk through the door with less than 10 minutes? Okay. Okay, maybe 30. Okay, yeah. Those are very important to have on file because it's a part of what's required for you to be a grantee. Okay. Okay. The value of any donated materials, equipment, building space, or lease shall be provided in a letter form, and the organization making the donation stating the value of the contribution and the duration of the commitment. I think you were asking somebody, yes, ma'am, you was asking that. I think it's very important, and I think that kind of gives a little bit more information about how that looks, and I'll be more than happy, between breaks and stuff to share a little bit more about, to help you get to a more quantifiable number and amount for that as well. But this is how the match is supposed to look, and kind of we expect to see it, like you said, in a letter form and really, really document it on what that match amount is from that particular community partner. Anytime during the grant term, so that's 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, anytime during the grant term, HUD may ask to review your match letters and a log of actual amount of match contributions used. So for our new grantees, are we clear of that HUD could come in, like our DC field office, Michael is here, Jarrell is here, they could come into any of the office and say, let me see your match, get out their little calculator, go to work to see if it adds up the way that it's supposed to be. So it's so very important that you really keep good match documentation of your grant contributions. Okay, I'm gonna let Chad do this because he's better at this reporting requirements than I am.
So the reporting requirements. The reporting section of the fiscal year 18 Ross Service Coordinator NOFA states that annual progress reports must include financial reports, SF-425s, and submission of the data in the reporting tool specified by HUD, which is the standards for success. Performance reports are due to the field office 30 days after the anniversary of the grant execution. I'm going to kind of pause right there a second. So if the grant was executed on March 18, 2019, are we still going to have the grants due after October?
Ask Trey.
Trey, so will the first annual report be due 30 days after October 30th or 30 days after March 18, 2020? March 18th, okay. 60 days after that. Okay, great. So the reports will be then due essentially 1 year after the execution of your grant. Your grant was executed on March 18, 2019. So at or about April 2020, we will be expecting your first annual report in the field office. And I'm telling you, I hear this a lot from grantees. They can't draw down in May or they can't draw down in June. And a lot of times it's because the field office has not received your first annual report. If we don't receive your first annual report, it's automatically locked in locks and you can't draw down anymore until we receive your first annual report and acknowledge receipt of your first annual report in locks. So I just want to point that out. So besides reporting and standards for success, make sure you contact your accounting or finance department to make sure that they are submitting their first SF-425. The first SF-425 should be approximately 1/3 of the total grant amount. It's really important to say that because we want to start to gauge to see how much money you guys have expended on the grant. If you're only spending 1/10 of the grant on your first annual report, something's wrong. You should be spending approximately 33% in your first, 66% on your second annual report, and 100% of your total grant at the end of your final report. With that said, if reports are not received by the deadline, grant funds will be suspended until reports are received. Now, the grant outcomes themselves, the narrative, the social service part of it is all reported in the Standards for Success tool. The field office doesn't see that. That all goes through essentially Trey's shop and office and also the Standards for Success office. The field office has no involvement in that at all. We just oversee the ELOCs with drawdowns and the reports that are submitted to the field office. Again, if you need the SF425 and you've never seen it before, it is available at grants.gov. You can just, the address is right there, and just pull down the form. You can fill it in. It's an Adobe form. Fill it out, and then you essentially just tell us how much federal funds you received and how much has been expended. And it should be pretty clear. Just, I will really want to stress that 1/3, 2/3, and 100% of the grant expended after the first, second, and third annual reports. With that said and done, I'll go ahead and hand it over.
I'm back. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Need to let you know that not always and rarely does this happen, but from time to time, Ross repayments and overpayments, they occur. And when they do, you have to know how to send us back our money. So this is how you would send our money back in the event of a situation that occurs like this. And you don't have to be concerned about when it will occur, how it will occur, because we're probably going to be reaching out to you to let you know that we need for you to send us about a certain amount of money. And it could be an ineligible activity occurred or somebody did something that they do. But however the situation will occur, we will help you make sure you have the proper way of getting us back those funds. So just want to let you know how we are to get our funds, and this is the information that you will get our funds back to us. Okay. Now, as we mentioned, you've heard from our Deputy Assistant Secretary, Felicia Gaither, who told you that we have regional staff as well as HUD field staff to be your first point of contact. And as you can see, Chad's name is in print there. Chad is the Far West Regional Administrator for the Ross grants and FSS grants. So those of you who are in the Far West, Chad is your regional person. But in addition to Chad being your regional person, there is some field office staff that support your area that you provide your Ross program. I believe I had someone that said, oh, I know mine, Margaret and I, we meet a lot. Margaret's with the Phoenix field office. So all of you have a representative, and I'm making a pledge today that before you all leave, all 153 of you will know who your field office person is. So I will do that. Also, like our regional field office staff, there are also, for those of you who are here with ONAP, we have counterparts with ONAP. So just want to let you know that our ONAP offices also have regional administrators, and we also provided their names for you in the handout. And I don't know if she's in the room, Monique Wisdom. Monique, would you please stand up? And y'all all look back at Monique. Monique, oh, come up for. Monique Wisdom is with our ONAP office, and she's my counterpart, so she's Charles for ONAP. So Monique has also ONAP grant administrators that help support your day-to-day operations of your grant, your Ross grant as well. Okay, HUD contacts, very, very important. Trey just mentioned to you all that if you really want to get in contact with Trey, you better remember this mailbox address, because this is the mailbox that Trey will email you back, I promise you, before the end of the day. So if you want an email to come back or a question or program technical assistance from Trey Yeomans, if you'll email ross-pih@hud.gov, that's the best way to get in contact with Trey. As you can see, I just introduced Monique, who is over our ONAP office. Also, Trey is our grant manager for our headquarters office. And then you see me, I'm with our field. So I oversee the 44 field office that Felicia Gaither, our Deputy Assistant Secretary, talked about. I'm your point of contact. My email is charles.eldridge@hud.gov. charles.eldridge@hud.gov. Email me. I'll email you back, or I will make sure that your field office staff get in contact with you. So at any time that you have not made the connection with your local field office, if you would please email me, charles.eldridge@hud.gov, I will make sure I make that introduction for you. but I'm also going to get that information to you before you leave on tomorrow. Also, you will meet later the person that kind of helps us manage our Standard for Success reporting on, Thaddeus Winsick. He will be here later, I think on tomorrow, doing a workshop. And also we have the Fort Worth Accounting Center who helps us manage us getting the money to you, make sure it's in logs, make sure your grants are physically managed as well. So we also have Hugh Wayne and Regina Marcellus with our Fort Worth Accounting Center, who is the financial arm of HUD that helps make sure that the money flows correctly. Okay, two good resources. Again, I want to mention the HUD Exchange. If you have not visited the HUD Exchange, do that. A lot of good information, particularly for our FY18 grantees. This is probably your best resource to go to really get you up to speed on your Ross program. And okay, start shutting it down. Okay. The Ross listserv, very, very, very important. This is give you up-to-date information. Please join the Ross listserv because it gives you real-time information about the Ross program. Okay. Yeah, I think we're going to question and answer. Trey, come back up with us.
So as you guys may see, Charles is a bit of a character, right? We're here to take some questions. I know there's a gentleman that had a question. So if you could start to make your way to the mics if you do have questions. We do want folks that are watching the live stream, as well as also wanted to make mention that we are recording today's session. So that's why we're looking at Charles like, get on the mic. I'm joking. So we can make sure that you guys are able to review also what we're discussing here today.
All right, thanks. My question is concerning eligibility. So those who are eligible for the grant, I had mentioned it to Dina earlier, but we have a unit that just went through Section 18, and we have some residents that are part of the Ross program. As long as they are in the Ross program now, if they are converting over to the tenant protection voucher, can they still stay under Ross right now, or do we have to disqualify them?
Unfortunately, they would be ineligible for Ross funding or to be served by the Ross coordinator. And this gets into very technical things, but the Ross program is appropriated and funded under the capital fund, which is for public housing. And so those other programs or HUD-assisted programs have their own appropriations, and so they'll have to go and abide by those appropriation laws and statutes and regulatory language. So unfortunately, those that are going through a demo disposition, which consists of Section 18, well, RAD is a little bit different, but there's the Section 18s, there's some other forms of demo dispositions that I can't think of right now, but I should know them.
Public housing conversion.
Yep. Yeah. Right. So they would be ineligible to be served by Ross.
Hi, I was talking earlier when you talked about the reentry. Clinton Head Housing is to being a part of that with Central Council. We have a building that we're letting them use, and they're turning it into a reentry and doing a coffee shop there. So I just wanted to say that was pretty cool collaboration.
Nice.
But also I have a question with the 25%, actually about the travel. Our 25% for our Ross is coming from Clinton Heights Housing for travel because there's no money in this program for travel. And in Southeast Alaska, I have to fly everywhere. Is that
What,
okay?
Can you use your the match funds to support any travel or training costs? So I would say the intent for a match is really because we understand that coordinators need partnerships. The real intent around the match, and that's why Charles was really stressing it, is to make sure that you have partners at the table to support all of the direct services that need to take place. I would say if there is match for any sort of training or travel, email the Ross mailbox, because I think we'll have to deliberate and figure out if,
Have that in our grant application.
right. But there may be, I would say we'll have to revisit that
Okay.
in those cases. Yep,
Great to know, thank you.
yep.
Hi there. Quick clarification. Chad indicated that the annual report would now be due in April. Trey indicated that the first report would be October 30th.
Yeah,
You want me to take it?
yeah. So, yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I think what Trey was getting at is that the 1 year after the grant anniversary will be in April. Will be essentially March 18th, 2020. However, I think, if I'm not mistaken, the standards for success reporting will occur after October 30th. So you will probably have to report after October 30th for all of your activities from March 18th through October 30th. That will be your first annual report in standards for success. However, at that time, we're not going to get an indicator in ELOCs until a year after the grant execution. So in April. The field office will get a reminder in ELOC saying, we need to receive your receipt of your first SF-425. If we don't, it will automatically turn off your funding. Yep.
Right, and I'll bring some clarity to that as well, because I know the ELOCs, that notification is automatic, right?
Yeah, it is.
And so bring some clarification to that as well, to not only you guys, but all grantees.
I would like for you to clarify job share as it pertains to our salary and fringe.
Yep, job share.
When you say job share, is that the one that we mentioned that 50?
Yes. On the grant for our salary and benefits, as far as what the service coordinator is supposed to be paid, you said that there could be job share. And so I wanted you to clarify what is job share.
Sure. So there may be an instance where in your application you requested $70,000 for one full-time service coordinator, but after you hired that service coordinator, and for whatever reason the salary and fringe was $50,000 as opposed to $70,000, you can use that additional $20,000 to job share by getting another service coordinator, and that person will be part-time. How HUD will see it is that you have funding for one full-time salary, but what you did was job share between two individuals to make up a full-time salary. Does that make sense to folks? Yeah.
And also, Trey, it can't go over the amount that you were budgeted for that one position.
Right. So if we recommended $70,000 a year, you can't, use Ross funds to pay $80,000 a year. That would be an ineligible activity. Charles will be knocking on your door.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for this information. It's really viable, and it's been really good to get clarity on a number of things. I have a question also pertaining to what the gentleman just asked previously about some of his participants being in Ross rolling over to another program. My question to you is, and I might be a little bit early, but my question is, if some of my participants that I referenced in my original submission in the grant, those numbers are now being dropped because now they're being rolled over to a new program that is being funded, am I to then make an adjustment in the number of participants that I had initially in my submission in the grant? Or can I just roll with what I have and continue with the decreasing of the participants in my program?
Yep. So if you're going through any other conversion that moves a family from public housing and to another form that's not Section 8, more than likely we're going to be, the grant funds will have to be recaptured and the Ross program will end. That's unfortunate, but that's what generally happens. In the case that there is the RAD conversion going from public housing to Section 8, it was so funny, we were saying we're not going to talk about RAD today. So this is really, but in the case that is going from public housing to Section 8, that family can continue to be served throughout the Ross program as long as the conversion, meaning the moment they become a Section 8 resident, does not happen before the grant term. So I think many of you guys should be fine, because we checked around with the field offices to make sure that your none of the units that you guys applied for went to from public housing to Section 8 during or before March 18, 2019. If that family goes to Section 8 after March 2019, can continue to be served. But what happens is when it comes to you applying for renewal funding, you can't use that family or those units under your application.
Going to have to do some extra work. Am I going to have to work back at getting back my original participants noted in the grant? Hypothetically, I had 75 participants in the Ross program. During the course of us receiving the grant, hypothetically, I've lost 5. So on my first year of reporting, do I need to try to regain that 5 to stay within the guidelines of the new Ross grant, or can I just roll with just the 70 participants from this day forward?
Aha,
I got you.
Because I thought it's not participants, it's units. So
Yeah, so it is about the units. It is about the units. So if a unit is vacant, then of course, if those 5 of those units are now vacant, because Ross is really about the number of units, then you have no choice but to serve the 70 units that are occupied. So it's really about what number is occupied. But we also want to see when those units do become occupied, that you're then serving those. But I do want to also mention, in the case that you may lose a number of units through a RAD conversion or a demo or disposition, it's important to reach out to HUD, because maybe not all funds may need to be recaptured, or not all, the whole Ross grant needs to end. What we've been able to work out in some cases is there's still a certain amount of public housing units that are in your portfolio. We've been able to then use those number of public housing units to determine then how much funding and the number of coordinators to support those families or those units.
Good afternoon. My question is similar to what the previous question was. So we have FSS and we have JPP that we work with. So if I make a referral to FSS because they want to get a job and they want to buy a home, now that person is no longer on my caseload, because that would be double dipping. So does that mean that I cannot count that person for that fiscal year because I worked with them and made a referral as the same as JPP? Can we share certain residents on our caseload?
So, let me ask you real quick, when you said make a referral, you just asking for some services or some assistance, or you actually physically saying, close down my case management of this person, you're taking the case management of this?
Correct.
Okay.
So now we have to hustle and go out there and replace that person, because now we've made a referral to another program which is HUD funded.
Got you. So that is a tricky question. So no to double dipping. I think that's where we'll start at, because at that point, that resident then signs a contract if they're going into the FSS program, and that becomes another formal process, as well as with Jobs Plus, which that is another formal process, and that's because of that earned income and all of that, those incentives that happen. So no, but in the case that, and don't quote me, I'll revisit this, and record it. But in the case that you're serving, say in January, you're serving a Ross participant, and from January to June, the Ross coordinator is serving them, and then from June to August, they transition to the FSS program. That is awesome. What happens then is, we'll talk about it, there's a data element called service start date and service end date. You'll then say when their end date is, and what HUD will then do a better process at looking at is why did they either end their the Ross program, and that could be to go to a Jobs Plus or an FSS program. So what she was saying is, how do we count those success stories in our data that you guys are collecting? You may not see it yet, and it probably will be added November 1st, 2019, which is we have a data element that does look at if a person is leaving or for whatever reason their service start date or their end date happened before the grant term. You can say why they either left the program.
Okay, hopefully my questions are a little easier. I have two of them, and I just need clarification
You can
again.
get closer to the mic.
I just have two of them. So I want to go back to the annual reporting because I really want to have this clear. I'm the one who does those reports for my staff. So this October, my annual reporting is due. I get that, no question. Then next March, I have to send in my SF425. Then next October, my other reporting is due. Is there any more separate SF425s that have to go each spring?
Yeah, so I'm gonna bring clarity to that on the in the grant agreement. I'm gonna make one more change.
Okay.
And so I'm glad we're talking about this because I do recognize that ELOCs, which I don't necessarily interact with ELOCs a lot, so my bad. But the ELOCs will send an annual notification. That's going to happen around that March 18th or April. Yeah. They're about, I think, 30 days after. So I'll bring clarity to that's just for the SF425 report, but your performance data is happening on October 30th, 2019.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. I do appreciate that. Now I want to go back to salaries. This year's salaries were very easy to figure because we had more current data and we could kind of guess what was going to happen. Of course, for fringe in next year, we made an educated guess when we came up with our salary points. Do you want us to correct annually and make sure our staff gets what we said what they were going to get, even if it was intended for fringe and now we have to convert to some sort of monetary bonus? Or can we wait to the third year to see if costs increase and maybe it is, you know, it goes higher than what we were expecting in the third year?
That was an easy question. I'm joking.
I thought it was.
So,
you guys wrote this stuff.
Right. So I would say that anytime you're applying for funding, what we try to make room for in the application is we said the average of your 3 salary comparability information plus 10%. And what we're hoping is that you're using that 10% to sort of predict what inflation or additional costs may happen. So we see some grantees that will go 56,000 one year, 57,000 the next year, 58,000 the next year on their year 3, just because they're anticipating either whatever salary increase may happen at their agencies amongst all their employees, plus any increases in the salary and fringe.
Okay, so we should look at them annually and adjust annually.
Yeah, but it still can't be over the amount that we recommend.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
No, we realize that we can't go over it. I'm just saying if we would hit under, we anticipate a fringe going up X amount of dollars and it doesn't, specifically medical insurance is the big,
Let me make sure I
unknown factor.
follow you. I want to make sure I'm following you because I'm hearing something different that you're saying. I'm hearing that you say that, okay, you applied for your grant and you said your service coordinator was going to be $65,000 or $60 a year, and then so I thought I was hearing that that's how it has to remain each year of the 3 years. So, and there's no.
No, there was. You could go up, but you had to put that in your grant that,
Yeah, as long as you put in the initial grant when you apply.
Right.
But not, I just want to make sure everyone heard that it's not like you come back in the second year of your grant and now it's gone to 68 or 66. It's at the initial application, you've done that work.
Right.
When you apply.
So you're projecting 3
Right,
years out
right.
what's going to happen
Right.
with fringes. That's an unknown.
Right.
Yeah.
And we often hear sometimes too, a coordinator may say, I'm now on my spouse's benefits, and now that frees up some money. And so that can be an opportunity then when you take those additional monies that will be unexpended to do job sharing.
Yeah.
Cool. So we have.
Afternoon.
Hello.
So I just wanted to ask one quick question, simple yes or no. Marketing and outreach materials to recruit for the Ross Grant, is that allowable under the administrative costs?
That is allowable, but we, so Chad, get up.
No,
It is allowable, I think, but it has to be for the Ross program. I think where it gets a little tricky is when we were talking, I sort of mentioned it, I'm sorry I didn't go in on this part, when we talk about reasonable, necessary, and allocable, we have to make sure any expense, and that includes marketing materials, is reasonable. So you're not paying, $1 million or the 50% of the grant or 50% of your admin funds for just one marketing of one event, So we want to make sure when we say reasonable, and we don't really define that because we do that on a case-by-case situation, then we say necessary. So is the expense necessary and really within the scope of the program, which is to lead residents towards self-sufficiency. So sometimes you may email the Ross mailbox and say, I'm doing this event, and we'll say no, because we're not really seeing the connection to the goal of the program, which is economic self-sufficiency for those that are work-able adults. And, so for example, we had a request to pay for a child's ballet class. That's a little out of the reach when it comes to the Ross program, but we really do hope that child, I'm an advocate of the arts. I did ballet for many years, so I want to make sure that folks, they understand the reasonable and necessary, but then the allocable. And so if you're doing a Ross event and it's shared with another event, how are you breaking up those costs, and how are those costs, when you talk about allocability, what is your agency's procedures around how they allocate money when an event or some sort of expense is being shared? And I think that's where it gets a little bit tricky, because if you're, it's not only around marketing materials, but if it's about space, if it's about, oftentimes it happens around space, or fax machines or copy machines or any of those things, how is then your agency allocating those funds when other staff or other programs at your agencies are also using those copy machines? So long story short, I answered your question, probably 100 more, which is it just has to be reasonable, necessary, and allocable. And so we are almost at time, and we are at time when it comes to the questions, but luckily no one is at the mics, and I don't think we have any questions that came through our email, so we can let you guys go for lunch a little bit early, but do want to give some logistics. We'll be meeting here back at 1:30 for lunch, and I will recommend that you guys, if you guys were in that line this morning, to get back maybe 15 minutes early so you can get back through HUD security, and we'll be waiting with smiling faces. Take your possessions, any valuables that you may have, and please also take your badges with you. You'll need that to get back in. And if you want to eat in the HUD building, you can eat outside of this auditorium. You cannot bring any food into this room.
You guys need to come in through the south entrance where you came in this morning. Okay?
Yes, and please come through the south entrance.